In the final days before his exile, Napoleon Bonaparte sat in a shadowy room, quietly shaking his head in a gesture of silent defeat. Even with his power stripped away, the emperor was on the verge of one final act, confessing a lifelong secret to his personal historian. Then his demeanor shifted. He suddenly cut the conversation short, refusing to elaborate. "No," he said. "What's the use? You'd never believe me." This moment of hesitation stands in contrast to a commander who had spent decades remaining unbothered by the pressure of opposing armies or political coalitions. This behavior raises a question about what specific experience could have impacted the composure of such a documented and battle-hardened figure. Napoleon chose a permanent silence over a public record, leaving a significant mystery at the end of his life. The origin of that silence reaches back to the heat of the Egyptian desert on August 12, 1799. Napoleon arrived at the Great Pyramid of Giza. At the time, his military campaign in the region was a central pillar of his rising imperial ambition. He moved deep into the monument, navigating the tight, claustrophobic stone corridors that ascend toward the center of the structure. His destination was the king's chamber, a room of absolute darkness and isolation located in the pyramid's core. Upon reaching the chamber, Napoleon issued an order his men found unusual. He demanded that his guides and assistants leave the room immediately. His men retreated down the narrow passageway, taking the torches with them and leaving the general alone without a light source. In that moment, a commander whose name already commanded thousands of soldiers chose to stand in absolute vulnerability inside an ancient tomb. Once the torches receded down the corridor, the physical darkness of the pyramid closed in instantly. Outside the chamber, his aides waited. Minutes passed, turning into a long, agonizing period of time for the men stationed in the hall. Inside, the silence was total, weighted by the millions of tons of limestone pressing down from every side. Within the room was nothing but the walls and empty stone sarcophagus. Finally, the silence broke as Napoleon emerged from the doorway. His physical state had changed. Records from the day describe him as looking unusually pale and visibly shaken. An aide immediately asked if the general had witnessed anything mysterious while he was alone in the dark. Napoleon responded with a sharp, abrupt no comment. He whispered a follow-up command. The incident inside the chamber was never to be mentioned again. The man who walked back into the desert sun was carrying a psychological burden that he had not possessed when he entered the pyramid. Because Napoleon maintained his silence for the rest of his life, there is no direct evidence of what occurred in that room. Scientific analysis of the pyramid's architecture suggests one leading hypothesis: an episode of extreme sensory deprivation. This diagram shows how the massive stone structure deadens all outside stimuli. This environment can disorient the human brain, creating a sense of crushing pressure. Another hypothesis is psychological. In that absolute isolation, Napoleon may have experienced a hallucinatory vision of his own eventual downfall. In the total darkness of the chamber, the human mind can project terrifying visions that create an intense, suffocating psychological reaction. Since Napoleon took his refusal to speak to the grave, the specific truth of that afternoon has been lost to history. Napoleon Bonaparte left the king's chamber with a secret that would keep him in a state of terrified silence for the rest of his life.